Welcome, welcome everyone. We are just going to give everyone a little bit of time to settle in and then we'll get underway. All right, we're on time. Well, thank you for joining us at Parrot Analytics Live. I am the VP of Marketing, and it's my pleasure to welcome you all today. Also, big hello to our Demand 360 Lite customers, and an especially warm welcome to our Demand 360 Enterprise partners. We're glad that you could join us today. In this session, we will be looking at the Global TV Demand Report. Produced quarterly, this report is available for free to all of our Demand 360 customers each quarter. And just for joining us today, we'd love to offer you a 30% discount on the report, available on a subscription basis. And I'll put a link to that in the chat to access that report shortly, which is the very report we are going to be discussing today. Now, some of you have already submitted through some questions to us. We have selected some of those, and we'll answer those at the end of the session today. It's been quite a few, so we're not going to be able to get through to all of them. And of course, if you've got any questions throughout this session today, please ask them anytime in the chat box, and we will attend to those as well. We'll just give the room a little bit more time to fill up, and then we'll get started. All right, well, welcome if you've just joined us. There's about 100 or so in the room here today, so I would now like to introduce Chris Hamilton, our lead analyst for this report. There's quite a lot of dense material in here, so I do hope that you have your favorite beverage in front of you, especially to our European customers joining us today in that time zone. So strap in and let's get started. Over to you, Chris.
Thanks, Samuel, and thanks everyone for showing up today. I really appreciate you coming here. I'm really excited to share this report with you and the findings we have. But before we jump in, I just want to take a moment and go over what the scope of this report is and why we release it every quarter. So this report looks at demand for digital original series in 2020, both globally and in 10 specific markets we picked out. Now, why do we release this on a regular basis? We know that original series are so important for streaming platforms. In-demand exclusive content is often the factor that drives subscribers to sign up. But we also know that traditional measurement is not keeping pace with the rapid change in the market. There's been such a proliferation of platforms. Each one has their own viewership metrics, and often these numbers are a closely guarded secret. That's where we feel like our unique demand data can step in and give insight into how these shows are performing globally and at a market-specific level. Now, like Samuel said, when we jump in, you're going to notice that there's a lot of information. This is a 75-page report. I don't want you to feel overwhelmed. That's the whole point of this guided walkthrough. That's what I'm here for. I'm going to be pointing out the most interesting takeaways and highlighting the most salient points. So sit back, relax. I think you're going to find there are some interesting insights. Let's get started. Right, so beginning with some global takeaways. This is the first chart I wanted to show you. So what are we looking at here? This map shows the most in-demand original series for 2020 in each of these markets. You're going to notice there's a lot of green. That's because in 9 of the 10 markets we looked at, The Mandalorian is the most in-demand digital original series for the year. Now that's really impressive given that Disney Plus launched at the end of 2019. The fact that they've been able to create this globally dominant hit that captured audience attention around the world has been part of the conversation is really quite an achievement. When I look at this map, I think this is what a global hit looks like. And I will say, this is looking at 2020, but already this year, we've been tracking WandaVision, And we've seen that as of mid-February, that became the most in-demand show in the world overall. And at that point, it was over 100 times the demand of the average show. And coming close on the heels of WandaVision is Falcon and the Winter Soldier. So it seems like Disney Plus has a string of blockbuster hits, one right after the other coming up. Now, also looking at this map, I think, are global viewing habits becoming more homogenous? Is this what the future of streaming looks like as these platforms expand their global footprint? Are we going to see more globally dominant hits that everyone around the world is talking about, are popular regardless of the market you live in? And I think the next slide gives an answer to that. So this map is looking at the number 2 most in-demand show in each of these markets. And you'll already notice there's a lot more color. So the variety of shows that are the second most in-demand digital original series for the year is pretty impressive. So across the 10 markets we looked at, there are 7 different shows that reach that number 2 spot. Those shows are in 3 different languages, so that's also an interesting amount of variety. One way in which they're not so different, 6 of the 7 shows are Netflix originals. And we see here, I've highlighted those in the top left. Some of them maybe aren't so surprising. So for example, Dark in Germany, that's a German language Netflix original. It was almost built to succeed in the German market. So that isn't necessarily a surprise. But La Casa de Papel, that's a bit more interesting. So that was a Spanish series that Netflix acquired and made its own original. It's in Spanish. Despite that, it's not the most popular Netflix original for the year. In Spain, it had its best performance in Italy. So that goes to show that there's a bit more to creating a hit in a market than just matching the country with the language of that show. I did also want to highlight Stranger Things and The Witcher. Those are really interesting. So if you're familiar, you'll know that those shows last released an episode in 2019. So the fact that they're the most in-demand Netflix original in several of these markets is really a testament to the durability of their demand. Now, comparing the first map we looked at with this one we're looking at right now, I think it's a story of the different stages of maturity between Disney Plus and Netflix. So compared to Netflix, Disney Plus is a new kid on the block. They launched much more recently. They're currently expanding into markets globally. What do we know about a new streaming service? The most important thing is signing up new subscribers. How do you do that? You have a tentpole blockbuster hit. That's what The Mandalorian is. That's what WandaVision has been. That's what we're going to keep seeing from Disney Plus. Contrast that with Netflix, who is the most established streamer. They have a footprint in all these markets around the world. They have a much larger subscriber base, and the sheer number of shows they churn out every year means that they can make shows that target each of these specific markets. So we see that amount of variety coming from Netflix in this map. Now, if those maps were comparing Netflix and Disney Plus, this next chart looks at Disney Plus against Apple TV Plus. And this is an interesting comparison because I like to think of these platforms as the twins that launched streaming wars. So both of them launched at the end of 2019, November 2019 specifically, so very close to each other, and really started the string of new platform launches we've seen throughout the year. Now this demand distribution here shows the top 5 original series from each of these platforms. Again, you'll see with Disney Plus, The Mandalorian far out leading the pack, averaging almost 60 times the demand of the average show globally for the year. Like I said, that's a tentpole blockbuster hit. One thing you might be surprised about is that Disney Plus's second most in-demand original series is Star Wars: The Clone Wars, the animated series. Now, the trajectory of that show has been really interesting to follow this year. So it wrapped up, concluded its series finale in May, and as you might expect, was a huge hit at the time, globally popular, saw an enormous spike in demand, but of course, after that happens, demand tends to fade, so it dropped off. But what we saw as we were watching The Mandalorian begin releasing episodes in October and start climbing the rankings of shows, it pulled Star Wars: The Clone Wars up with it. And so the fact that Star Wars: The Clone Wars was able to start climbing the rankings again months after it wrapped up without releasing any new episodes of its own is really a great example of how to masterfully use intellectual property. And if you know anything about these shows, you'll know that there were actually some characters crossing over between Star Wars: The Clone Wars and The Mandalorian. So this wasn't by accident, it was very intentional. But that is a great story of how to effectively use IP franchises. Now turning to Apple TV Plus for a moment. So the thing that struck me about Apple TV Plus, and you can see it in this chart, is their top series are very high in demand. You'll see all of them fall in our what we call our outstanding bucket, and only 2.7% of shows ever make it to this level of demand. What's also striking to me is how consistently they perform. So they are really all very similarly high in demand. It's not a story like we see with Disney, where The Mandalorian is far out ahead of the rest of the platform's originals. And to me, comparing these two things is a story about different monetization strategies. So if we think of Disney Plus as more of a pure play streaming service, you're signing up to it to watch the shows on Disney Plus. How are you getting hooked to sign up for Disney Plus? That's what The Mandalorian is doing. That's what WandaVision is doing. That's what The Falcon and the Winter Soldier is going to be doing. You're getting pulled in by a show that everyone is talking about, is so popular, dominates the conversation. You feel like you'll miss out if you don't see it. You can only see it on Disney Plus. That's how you're getting pulled in. With Apple TV Plus, I've seen the statistic mention that something like 60% of subscribers are on the free plan that comes with getting an Apple device. So for me, the way that Apple pulls you in to its ecosystem is by purchasing an Apple device. So that's the hook. Whereas with Disney Plus, The Mandalorian's the hook that gets you to sign up. But with Apple, once you're in there, hopefully you'll find a very high quality series like we see here that will keep you coming back for more. Now, this next chart looks at the most successful, most in-demand new releases of the year 2020. And one thing you'll notice looking through the support, looking at the top shows of the year in each of these markets, is that actually a lot of the most in-demand shows are not new this year. They're shows that are on their second, third plus season. And to me, I think that says something about what it takes to really reach that highest tier of demand. You have to have an established fan base. People have to be aware of you, looking forward to your next season coming out. So it really is hard to achieve that as a brand new series. So that's why I wanted to break these out and give some credit to the shows that had the most successful launch this year. And in particular, I did want to highlight two of these because I think they tell different stories about how you have a successful launch. So first, Star Trek Picard. You'll see that was the most in-demand digital original launch of the year. And I should mention, this chart is looking at these series releases in the first 30 days since they've been released. So it is an apples to apples comparison, keeps it fair. It's only looking at that first 30 days. Star Trek Picard was the most in-demand digital original premiere of the year, had about 47 times the demand of the average series in its first 30 days. And now I almost feel like this is an unfair comparison because Star Trek Picard has so many advantages that allowed it to succeed here. So yes, it is a new series, but it is launching into the well-developed Star Trek universe that has so many fans around the world eagerly awaiting the next Star Trek series. So it had an existing fan base when it launched. It didn't have to build that following like some of these other brand new series do. It's also interesting to note that this show in particular isn't just a new show in the Star Trek franchise. It's an overt continuation of an existing Star Trek series, Star Trek: The Next Generation. And you see several of the characters actually reprising their roles. So this was built to excite Star Trek fans. So that's part of its secret to success. Now, on the flip side of that, I want to call out Tiger King, the 10th most successful new release of the year. That didn't have any of the advantages of Star Trek. That did not have an existing developed IP franchise, not an existing fan base. This is a story about being in the right place at the right time. So if you recall, Tiger King released in March of 2020, around what I call peak lockdown. Everyone was sort of coming to terms with the new reality of the pandemic. Everyone was at home, binging through content, finding the next thing to watch. And here's this wonderfully weird, strange show that everyone is talking about. And so that was how that became one of the most successful premieres 2020. Now, a report on content trends in 2020 would not be complete without a mention of COVID-19 and how the pandemic has affected audience behavior. So really, this is a huge topic and it deserves its own report, which we actually have. But I thought it was important to include here so you can keep these trends in mind as you're looking at the rest of the report. So I'll start with the chart on the left. So COVID-19 has been a developing situation. Trends have come and gone, changed throughout the year. This chart looks at specifically the immediate impacts of the COVID-19 lockdowns on audience demand. So that was a sort of immediate first impact we saw. We looked at March 16th as the critical date and measured the difference between the 2 weeks before that and the 2 weeks after that. And I love how we can see audience demand already shifting in response to that. We see increasing demand for sitcoms at the right. Obviously, that's part of the comfort viewing trend. People are stressed out, worried, anxious. They're looking for some easy viewing to see. That's what sitcoms is doing here. The flip side of that, medical dramas. Medical dramas at the time, immediately following lockdowns, are probably way too real for people. People want to see less of that. I also like this chart because it gets at some of the more abstract shifts in viewer demand. So we can see the audience is wanting more of shows that deal with teamwork and adventure, kind of contrasting with being locked down inside, stuff that's getting out, adventure. Also demanding less shows with the themes of loneliness, isolation. That's pretty self-explanatory. Now, I also want to highlight the 3 points over at the right. So throughout the year, we've been tracking different COVID trends. So one of the things we've seen is higher demand for travel content, particularly in the summer. Now, this isn't a surprise. A lot of summer vacations were canceled this year. And as people are at home, they're looking for something to fill that gap. Where are they turning to? They're looking at travel documentary series, travel reality series to kind of make up for their canceled vacation. We've also measured a pretty across the board increase in demand for old favorites. What are these shows? These shows are shows that ended 5, 10 years ago, usually have many seasons of episodes. So the increase in demand is not due to new episodes being released. It's due to fans at home burning through a lot more content. And in many cases, the current shows they would normally be watching, production has been disrupted. So where are they turning to fill that gap? They're looking towards these familiar favorites. Think classic sitcoms like The Office, Friends, Seinfeld, but also dramas like West Wing. And the beauty of these shows at this time is they have such large back catalogs of episodes you can just continue to binge through without running out of stuff to watch. And the third point I want to call out, and I love this because this is a trend that has been in place for years. So it's not new due to COVID. COVID merely accelerated this. And I think this is the case with a lot of trends we've seen this year. Think of remote working, online shopping, e-commerce. These have been trending upward for years. So they're not new to COVID. COVID merely just rapidly accelerated them. That's what we've seen with a demand for foreign content. So particularly in the US, every quarter this year, American audiences have demanded a greater share of content from non-US markets than at any other point in the previous years. So that's, again, audiences expanding their horizons, maybe running out of what they would normally be watching, looking somewhere else, they're discovering foreign content. So this is sort of a high-level overview of how these platforms have performed this year. This is the global demand share of each of these platforms in 2020. What you'll notice, Netflix, still very dominant, has a majority share of demand for the year. 53.5% of demand in 2020 for a digital original was for a Netflix original. That's still a very dominant position, but I should mention that last year they had around 60%. So they've taken a 6.3% decrease to their share. That's significant, and that's due mainly to these new streaming platforms, Apple TV Plus, Disney Plus, HBO Max, each carving out their own slice of the pie this year. Other established platforms, Amazon Prime Video, Hulu, CBS All Access, now Paramount Plus, they've seen a hit to their demand share this year, but not nearly to the same extent as Netflix has. The other point of this chart I want to call out is this other bucket. So this is smaller streaming platforms, platforms that are local to a specific market that maybe don't have as large of a demand share as the ones we've broken out here. This has seen really impressive growth this year. Last year it made up 8.8%. This year it's 13%. That's due to the launch of new platforms. So for example, think Peacock. We haven't broken that out here. That's in that other bucket. That simply didn't exist last year. Now its original series are contributing to demand in this other category. But this is also local platforms in countries around the world. And that's part of the trend I mentioned of audiences looking for more foreign origin content. That's growing this demand share of this other category. So those were the global findings. Now we're going to get into some country-specific findings. The report has 10 markets that we do a deep dive on. But here I picked out 5 particular ones, and I'm going to be zeroing in on the most unique finding for each country to hopefully narrow it down. So let's get started. With the United States. The United States loves to laugh. It's our most comedy-loving market of the year. So if you'll start by looking at the pie chart on the left, this is the demand share breakdown of US demand by genre. So the United States is actually the least drama-dominated market of the markets we look at in this report. Drama only accounts for about 35% of demand for original series in the US. That's substantially smaller than in most other markets. As a result of that, these other genres are seeing a larger demand share in the US than they do in other markets. And I particularly wanted to call out comedy. So with 18.7% demand share for the year in the US, that's larger than any other market we looked at. And it also comes through if you look at the most in-demand subgenres for the year at the right. So we can see comedy, drama, and sitcom ranking number 2 and number 5 in the US for the year. Those rank more highly here than they do in any other market. And particularly, I wanted to highlight comedy drama. The fact that that came so close to unseating sci-fi drama as the most in-demand subgenre of the year is really a testament to how popular comedy is in the US. Sci-fi drama is really usually a very dominant subgenre looking at these markets. In a majority of markets in this report, it's the number 1 genre. In a handful of markets, it's crime drama. But in the US, comedy drama came so close to being number 1, it's only 2%, has 2% less demand than sci-fi drama. So that shows American audiences love comedy. Now, I want to focus on the middle chart here, the time series. This shows how platform demand shares have changed over the last 24 months, last 2 years. I love this chart because you can literally see the market fracturing. And I can say doing these charts in the past, they maybe weren't that interesting to look at. It was Netflix having a majority share, Amazon Prime Video, Hulu, CBS All Access in yellow, holding pretty consistent across time. But starting at the end of 2019 with Apple TV Plus and Disney Plus jumping on the scene, we can really see a lot of movement going on in the chart. This year, HBO Max launching. I love that now at the end of this time series, it's basically a rainbow. And looking at the pie chart, we can see Netflix still just barely has a majority share of demand for original content in the US. This is down, it's lost 7.3% share this year. And it's taken the biggest hit from these new platforms, Apple TV Plus, Disney Plus, HBO Max. Amazon Prime Video and Hulu have held up pretty well, actually. They've each lost less than 1% of their demand share. So that was the US. Moving on to Brazil. Brazil was our most superhero-loving series in the report this year. And in fact, it's the only market where superhero series is the most in-demand subgenre for the year. That makes Brazil unique. As a result of that, it also has the largest share of demand for action-adventure content because superhero series fall into that genre. So we can see that in the pie chart at the left. I did want to focus on specifically what's going on in the action-adventure genre. That's these two charts on the right. So in Brazil, HBO Max and Amazon Prime Video each achieved their highest share of demand in the action-adventure genre in Brazil. That's due to their superhero series. So HBO Max, no surprise there, basically absorbed the DC Universe superhero series, which were already very popular in Brazil. That's the secret to its success in Brazil. It took these shows that already had a huge following in Brazil, absorbed them to its platform, achieved its highest demand share in Brazil for the year. Amazon Prime Video has more going on in its action adventure category than just superhero series, but the excellent performance of The Boys, particularly in Brazil, made it achieve its best result here this year. Now, the flip side of this is Disney Plus. So Disney Plus saw its lowest share of demand in the action adventure category in Brazil for the year. Why is this? This is because a majority of demand for Disney Plus action adventure originals is from The Mandalorian. The Mandalorian is not a superhero series. So that's why it didn't do as well in Brazil for the year. But I will say, as Disney Plus starts releasing its Marvel original series, WandaVision, Falcon and the Winter Soldier, Loki, more to come, expect it to have good growth in the Brazilian market. On here, at the end of every market, we highlight the top original series for the year, the most in-demand original series for the year. So you'll see here, just looking at it, there are many superhero series reaching the top tier of demand in Brazil. We see several coming from HBO Max, those formerly DC Universe shows. We also see The Boys from Amazon Prime Video, Umbrella Academy on Netflix. Now, what I thought was interesting is, to me, this shows that comparing this to other markets shows that Brazilians' love of superhero series is not specific to one show or one franchise even. If we look at The Boys, for example, that ranked more highly in Australia. Umbrella Academy and Titans, those were both higher ranked in the US for the year. So to me, that says that Brazilians' love of superhero series is not tied to a specific show. It's really just a more general preference in Brazil. All right, so moving on to Germany. Germany is our most sci-fi loving market. It loves sci-fi in all of its forms. So here in Germany, we can see both sci-fi drama and sci-fi action performing very well for the year among the top subgenres in Germany. But I think that Germans' preference for sci-fi comes through a lot better looking at the top shows for the year. And because this is a more abstract concept and not immediately obvious, I've just highlighted all the sci-fi series in Germany's top series for the year. So seven series in the top 20 are sci-fi series, whether that's sci-fi action or sci-fi drama. Mandalorian, number one, no surprise there. Also from the Star Trek franchise, Picard and Discovery. The shows I've starred rank more highly in Germany than they do in any other market. So Altered Carbon, that was the 13th most in-demand digital original series in Germany for the year. In most markets, it struggled to make it into the top 50, so it performed significantly better in Germany. Similar with Raised by Wolves from HBO Max, that had its best rank in Germany for the year. But I also wanted to call out Upload, so that Amazon Prime Video original series. We don't categorize that as a sci-fi drama or sci-fi action series. It's a comedy, but if you know anything about the premise of this show, it's a man dies, his consciousness gets virtually uploaded to this virtual afterlife, and it is a comedy, but knowing that, it really has sci-fi themes, so I flagged it here, and it performs significantly better in Germany for the year than in any other market. All right, Italy. Italy is our most drama-loving market. And this is really obvious coming from these two charts. So on the left, Italy, for the year, Italians expressed 55% of their demand for drama originals. That's larger than in any other market. We can also see this looking at the subgenres for the year. So 7 of the top 10 subgenres are drama subgenres in Italy. That's more than in any other market. I also wanted to call out comedy drama. So yes, we consider that a comedy, but it's like saying when a comedy succeeds in Italy, it has that dash of drama that Italians love. So a similar trend we've seen in Italy, it is the most Netflix-dominated market. Netflix originals account for 60% demand share for the year in Italy. These two things are related. Italians love the drama and Netflix's dominance here. Let me show you why. So looking at the top series for the year, you'll see a lot of red. That's because a lot of Netflix original series make it into the top tier of demand in Italy. And the ones I've starred, these are actually Netflix Italian language originals. So Suburra, that's an Italian crime drama. Baby and Summertime, those are Italian teen dramas. Jerome, that's a drama set in northern Italy in Italian from Netflix. So Netflix is producing highly in-demand local content for Italy, and it's succeeding here. But that's not all. It isn't just Netflix's Italian originals that are succeeding in Italy. Netflix series do really well here regardless. So like I pointed out before, the top most in-demand Netflix original for the year in Italy is La Casa de Papel. That's a Spanish language show. But we also see Black Mirror, The Queen's Gambit ranking more highly in Italy than they do in any other market. So it seems like, yes, Netflix has been really successful making Italian language originals for Italy, but Italians have also learned to love non-Italian Netflix series. All right, and last, but certainly not least, Spain. This was my favorite market to look at in this year's report because it's really a local platform success story, and you're going to see why. So we can see for the year, the platform share of demand in Spain looks totally different from any other market. That's because there is a local platform, Movistar Plus, that has carved out a significant share of demand for itself in this market. So as a result of that, it's really compressed the demand share of these other platforms. I'll move on to looking at drama specifically on the left. So Movistar Plus still has a significant share of demand here. I do want to point out, so Netflix, yes, it's put pressure on the demand share of these other platforms, but actually Netflix still has a greater share of demand in Spain for dramas than in many other markets. And I think this is due to Netflix producing highly in-demand original Spanish language series. So they really seem well positioned to defend against Movistar Plus in this market. And looking at the top most in-demand series for the year in Spain, you'll see a lot of them are from Movistar Plus. But I did want to call out the most in-demand original series from a local platform in Spain is actually from A3 Player. And that show is La Valla. This is really interesting because if you know the premise of the show, it's a dystopian future where the world is ravaged by a pandemic. This came out in January of 2020. So I can't think of a better time for a show like this to come out and really ride that wave of COVID interest, COVID trends. So that was part of its success there. It's also interesting, La Peste from Movistar Plus, that did very well this year, despite not having released a new episode since 2019. And I think that's, again, a story of the themes of that show being related to the pandemic. So the story of it is that show is about it's set in 16th century Seville. It's about a bubonic plague. So people are looking to that this year with a new lens, and it was very successful in 2020, despite not having released episodes since 2019. Yeah, so that's all I have for you today. I'm going to be checking to see if there are any questions. Just give me a minute.
A couple have come through, Chris, but I
Excellent.
did my best to answer most of them in the chat. I think there's just one
Thanks,
that's
Samuel.
it's a comment more than a question.
Okay, yeah, so actually it sounds like someone had a great idea. A chart that shows countries and territories as undersaturated and saturated would make for an interesting reading. That's totally true, and I love that because we did get at that a bit in the COVID chart, saturated versus undersaturated. And I love that point because if I tell you something like comedies account for 10% of demand in the US, without context, is that good or is that bad? We don't know. Saturated versus undersaturated, that sort of pulls in supply. So if I were to tell you that 5% of the titles in the US are comedies and they account for 10% of demand, that's an entirely new context. That tells you that comedies are punching above their weight. So I love that saturated, undersaturated analysis. And maybe that's something we'll look at bringing in next quarter's report or the next annual report. So thanks for that tip. I did want to highlight, we had a lot of questions come in before the webinar about specifically documentaries, unscripted content, factual content. So it seems like a lot of people are interested in this. So I wanted to talk a bit about that. So we've seen an increase in demand for documentary content in pretty much all the markets we looked at. In fact, let me just jump back up to the US real quick and I'll show you something. Just a minute. Yeah. So in the US, documentaries accounted for 9% of demand share for the year. That's higher than any other market, but what's really interesting is that last year, this was 4%. So it's more than doubled its demand share this year. And I think a few things are contributing to this. So multiple COVID trends, like I highlighted before, travel documentary series, they're seeing a boost. A lot of comfort viewing. So think of nature documentaries, sort of that easygoing animals you put on in the background, stuff like that, seeing a boost. Also wanted to be sure to give a shout out to sports documentaries. So sports documentary series have been filling the void left by live sports. The best example I can think of for this is The Last Dance. That's not a digital original, but from the Global TV Demand Awards this year, it was announced that it was the most in-demand documentary series for the year. That success is due to it being a sports documentary in a year without live sports. And part of the beauty of documentaries from a supply side is where production's been disrupted for a lot of series, documentaries can leverage archival footage, and The Last Dance did that really well without going out and filming new shots. So that can be done in a COVID safe situation. So The Last Dance is a great example of sports documentaries succeeding, making use of archival footage to get around production complications from the pandemic. I did also want to say, so we didn't highlight Australia in this presentation. It is in the report. One show that was highly in demand in Australia was an original from Amazon. It's called The Test, A New Era for Australia's Team. That's a sports documentary about cricket. And that came out in March. So similar to The Last Dance, but Australia specific, it saw an increase in demand because it was filling that void of live sports. And are there any other questions?
There are a couple, yeah. Have a look in chat.
Anime, so yes, anime. Anime seems to always do very well, and we've seen it trending upward. It didn't make it into any of the top 10 subgenres for the year in this report. Now, keep in mind, this report is looking at digital originals. A majority of anime are not digital original to a streaming platform. So that's part of the explanation there. So that's potentially why you're not seeing it in the top 10. It very well may have been if we were looking at all content and hadn't narrowed it down to digital originals specifically. Oh, so this is an interesting, good question. I don't know that I have an answer. So what about foreign content share by country? Which country has the largest affinity to watch other countries' stuff? So I don't know that off the top of my head, but I can say in the US, because we've really looked at American demand for foreign content. That is where we've seen this huge increase this year, quarter on quarter, higher than any other previous year. So it's really been growing in the US, but it would be interesting to look at other markets. So yeah, maybe something to include in the next quarter's report. So I think we're about done with time, Samuel, is that?
Yeah, I think we're there. Absolutely. Someone's just asked for, there's a couple more. So insights on Korea, South Korea. So that's again a market we can cover in a future report. There's a question on BritBox. Obviously, we can't break out all of the platforms for every single market. So if you want to elaborate any more on that, Chris. But I think we are pretty much on time. We just want to say thank you first and foremost for really an interactive session with many questions coming through from the audience. What this suggests to us is maybe we need to plan for a little bit more time next time. So that one's on us. We will make sure that the session extends a little bit longer so we can get through all the questions. But if you can just get us back to the last slide, Chris, then we'll go from there. And just thank you for a really interesting presentation on sharing the global insights that you have found. And again, if we didn't cover your market today, then please do subscribe to Demand 360 Lite with that special sign up link. And then you can look at any of the markets we have in the platform. It's 46 at the moment and expanding continuously, at your leisure. And on an enterprise level, we are applying our product, services, APIs, and consulting expertise to assist companies throughout the content lifecycle to achieve better results. We help our clients with objectives such as acquisition of titles, commissioning with an eye on international sales, and the optimization of OTT catalogs for different launch regions. And if you would like to find out more about the benefits of partnering with Parrot Analytics on a strategic enterprise engagement, please do reach out to me directly. You can reach me on Samuel@Parrot Analytics, and I will then put you in touch with the best person on our end. Now, there's many more questions coming through there. See if we can maybe take one last one. Does the 360 Lite subscription include all TV, not just digital original? Thank you for asking that. Yes, it does. Absolutely. So we cover the entire spectrum of TV series around the world, and broadcast linear is 100% included. So, hey, thank you so much for joining us at Parrot Analytics Live. We do hope to see you at the next session. We've got some really exciting panelists and speakers lined up. Not that you were not exciting, Chris, but we would love to see you again. Tell your colleagues, and we look forward to seeing you again. Thank you so much. Bye for now.
Thanks, everyone.